Hey guys, this is Hunter with Deflection your Hero Clicks, and today we're going to kick off a new video series. This is going to be called Rules Explanation Series, and basically how it's going to work is I'm going to take a new piece that's popular but also kind of complicated and giving the average Clicks player troubles, whether that's because of a confusing power or trait or something about the piece. And I'm going to go over the rules, go over the power, and explain how it works, and not only how it works, but why it works the way it does. And hopefully get you guys in the proper thought process for some of these things so that when you're out playing a game on the fly, you can kind of figure things out for yourself without having to rush to the internet to try to, frantically find your answer. Hopefully I can kind of break down and help you understand why things work the way they are, not just how they work. So our main topic of discussion today is Malekith, as I said, and his trait. The Aether and I are one. The way that the wording is, characters hit by an attack from Malekith can't use defense powers until their next turn. So here's how it would work in most situations. In this situation, we have Malekith up there on top, and he's shooting down at Lizard. We have a 12 attack, Malekith is on his first click, and we have Lizard on his first click as well. 12 attack on a 17 toughness. How this would typically work is, Malekith targets Lizard, he would get shape change, because if you're a newer player, you may think of shape change as a defensive power. However, it is in the damage slot, therefore it's not affected by this. So he would roll shape change. He rolls a 1, he misses shape change. Now Malekith makes his attack, 12 on a 17. He hits that attack. And now the steps would go. Malekith has hit the attack by rolling the dice high enough and the attack not being evaded. So he hit the attack. Now Lizard gets no defense power. So the toughness that he possesses, he will not get to use. Therefore, he will take the full 5 damage from Malekith and will not reduce it using toughness. Now you can apply this exact same situation to similar powers such as Mastermind, Toughness, Invulnerability, Impervious, and Invincible, because they're going to work the exact same way. The attack is going to hit before the damage is transferred or reduced or ignored. That seems pretty straightforward. Now the problem with Malekith and his trait arises when more factors kick in. So we're going to cover some of those other powers and what may come up and why they work the way they do. Alright, let's go over how he would interact with willpower. Well, first let's start by removing the Scarlet Witch, removing her sculpt from the base, because it annoys me that her sculpt covers her freaking dial. It probably annoys you guys as well. So let's say Scarlet Witch is starting on her click 4 at the moment, and she has willpower in the defensive slot. Now note, this is only going to be the case for willpower in the defense slot. His power does not affect Indomitable if they possess it on the shield. But because she's getting the willpower from the standard willpower in the defense slot, and let's say she already had an action token to begin with. Now it's Malekith and Shocker's turn. Malekith hits her, and let's say he hits her but he doesn't kill her, and let's say she still stays on willpower. So she has now been hit by Malekith, therefore she has no willpower now. So when Shocker uses Incap and hits Scarlet Witch and gives her that second action token, now she does have to push. She no longer has willpower. However, she will have it when it goes back to her turn, because the wording on Malekith's trait says they lose their defensive powers until that character's next turn. Well, whenever the Malekith player switches over to Scarlet Witch to their team, now it's Scarlet Witch's turn. It's that player's turn. Therefore, she now has her defensive powers back. Therefore, she has her willpower back, and if she needed it, could use it in a certain situation. I should also note that Regen and Barrier and Defend are also no longer usable, but only until your next turn. So really, it's not even really affecting Regen or Barrier, because those are going to be taking place on the Scarlet Witch's player's turn, and by the time that it goes back from Malekith to Scarlet Witch's turn, they're going to have the power back. It's no longer going to be countered by Malekith's trait. Now in this situation, we have Amazing Spider-Man main set Electro, 021 on his first click with a 16 energy shield. Now with Malekith's trait, the opposing character will still get to use Energy Shield and Combat Reflexes for the attack that Malekith is making on them because of the wording on Energy Shield Deflection. So let's read that. Modify this character's defense value by +2 against ranged attacks. So what that means is when Malekith does the attack, they get the +2 defense. That occurs before the hit actually happens. That occurs while the attack is being made. So let's say, for instance, that Malekith has a 12, Electro has a 16 plus Energy Shield. Now typically, if he rolled a 4, that would be a 16. However, Electro does get to use the Energy Shield because the Energy Shield kicks in before the attack hits. So Malekith has to hit a 6 or higher in order to hit Electro. One thing to note is, let's say again, Malekith has Shocker on his team. Let's say Malekith hits Electro, even with him getting Energy Shield. He hits him, he takes damage. Now, he still has Energy Shield. However, since he has now been hit by an attack, he will not get the Energy Shield until his next turn. So therefore, if Shocker goes ahead and makes an attack also on Electro, Shocker will not have to give him Energy Shield Deflection or Combat Reflexes if it's a melee attack, depending on the situation. So that's important to note. They will get it against Malekith. However, if they end up getting hit, now they have been hit and they no longer can use defensive powers. So therefore, Shocker does not have to deal with Energy Shield Deflection. And like I said, same thing will go with Combat Reflexes. By far the trickiest situation with this is with Super Senses. And that's because of a little, I call it unclarification on the wording of Super Senses. So I'll explain how it works and why it works. Let's read Super Senses first off. Super Senses. When this character is hit by an attack, you may roll a d6 before damage is dealt. On a result of 5 or 6, this character evades the attack. So we have Alyosha Craven here. He's on click number 3 and he has Super Senses with a 17. So let's say Malekith has a 12 attack. He rolls. He hit his attack. He rolled high enough. Now, the question becomes, would Alyosha get to use Super Senses? The answer is yes. And I'll explain why. That's because of the word evade. A successful Super Senses evades the attack, and it was never actually hit to begin with until the bad Super Senses roll happens. So until he misses Super Senses, say by rolling a 1. So if he misses Super Senses, now it is a hit. We're going to explain that and verify that by looking at evade in the glossary. It's defined as, let's pull it up here. Sorry, I thought I had it pulled up. There it is. Evade. To avoid being hit by an attack that would normally be successful. So you're avoiding being hit in the first place. A hit is defined as when the result of 2d6 and the attacker's attack value is equal to or greater than the defense value of the target. So that part we got. It's the second part of hit that makes Super Senses be allowed. And the target does not evade the attack. So you see right there in the explanation of hit that they will get Super Senses because Malekith has not hit Craven until he has his chance to evade the attack. So the wording on Super Senses could use some cleaning up, in my opinion. They could put some wording on there to say before a hit or something like, or before a character is hit by an attack, you may roll a d6 or something like that. There's multiple ways they could do it, but honestly, if you go through the player's guide and through the glossaries and the rule books and stuff, this stuff is there. It just takes some finding to get used to. So bottom line is, when Malekith makes the original attack, the target does get Super Senses if the Super Senses, even if the Super Senses is in the defensive slot, and that's because they're attempting to evade before the attack actually hits. But again, if he does do that and a bad Super Senses roll happens, then any other characters on this turn that attack Alyosha, he will no longer have Super Senses because he has now been hit. Therefore, he no longer has defense power until his next turn. Now let's take into consideration our good buddy Gravity Feed Wolverine and the X-Men Wolverine, who has traded regen and toughness. Now the question becomes, does Wolverine get toughness and regen, well, specifically toughness, against Malekith's attack? The answer is yes. Here's why. Power, the source of the toughness is not coming from the defensive slot that Wolverine has. The source is coming from a trait. When Malekith attacks you, the defensive powers he's removing is any power that is located in the defensive slot on that current target. If they have a power from another source, say from a trait, or even from a special power on an attack symbol or a damage symbol, they will get those powers, or from a resource. And we'll go over all of these individually. So let's explain why that is the case. Well, first of all, page 5 of the Player's Guide describes powers as when a game effect refers to a standard combat type power, it is referring to a standard power in that combat type's stat. For example, a standard attack power would include Quake, but would not include Charge. Even though there is an attack involved in Charge, Charge is not an attack power. It would be a movement power. And then if we go over to, so that was from page 5 of the Player's Guide. The rulebook defines standard powers, and I'm putting standard in quotes, standard powers in the core rulebook. A standard power is a power with only its name printed next to the circle on the character's card, such as Blades, Claws, Fangs. An explanation of its effects appear on the PAC. A named power like Seismic Blast, quotes, Quake, is a standard power with a specific descriptive title. It's capitalized next to a circle followed by parentheses in the name of the standard power, which is explained on the PAC. All references to a standard power in a game effect refer to a standard or named power. So this is telling you that when it says powers and doesn't specify standard, if it just says powers like Malekith's trait says, then it only refers to the slot in which those powers are possessed on the character. So that's how you get your answer. The answer is Wolverine will get any defense powers that are coming, standard defense powers that are coming from his trait. That is because the trait of Malekith says defense powers and doesn't specify standard defense powers. So when Malekith hits you, whatever power is in your defensive slot, you cannot use once you are hit. So again, remember, Super Senses evades it in the first place, so they're not actually hit. Once you are hit, then you can no longer use the defense powers in your slot. One cool interaction that comes up with Malekith now is another new hot figure, Uru Forge Absorbing Man, which is the LE-103 from Invincible Iron Man. He has a special defense power in his defensive slot called Uru Metal. When Absorbing Man is dealt damage or healed, roll a d6. Absorbing Man ignores the damage dealt or healed unless it is the same as the result of the d6. This power cannot be countered or ignored. So the question becomes, does Malekith have to worry about that? The answer is no, he doesn't. And the reason is because Malekith is not countering that defense power, and he's not ignoring it. All he is doing is making it so that Absorbing Man cannot use it. So Absorbing Man technically still has and possesses this power. He just cannot use it until his next turn. And therefore, whenever Malekith hits Absorbing Man, he will do the full 5 damage. It will not be... He will not have to do the dice roll and hit it exactly on the nose because Absorbing Man cannot use it, and that is coming from his defense slot. Again, if that was Absorbing Man's trait, then he would still get to use it and Malekith would have to deal with it. But in this situation between these two figures, Malekith does not have to worry about it and would pretty much, he would exactly one-shot Absorbing Man if Malekith was on his top click, which is a hard feat to accomplish. In this situation, I have the Emma Frost from the AVX starter set, and she's on click number 3. She has a special defensive power, Diamond Form. Emma can use Exploit Weakness, Impervious, and Shape Change. So, at the top of the show, I said Shape Change is a standard damage power. which is typically located in the damage slot. However, she is getting her shape change from the defensive slot. So a thing to note is, Malekith goes to make his attack. She will initially get shape change because shape change occurs when when she is targeted. So if she rolls shape change and misses it, then Malekith proceeds to attack. He hits, he only needs a 5, he hits his attack. She does not get the impervious because she has now been hit, so she doesn't get the impervious part of her damage ability. And now for the rest of the turn, if Shocker goes to attack Emma Frost, Emma cannot use that shape change again. And then lastly, let's look at a defensive power from an outside source. In this situation, the Infinity Gauntlet. So we have Lizard with the Infinity Gauntlet, which is on click 20... Boy, that's some tiny print. 19. Click 19, which gives invulnerable. So when Malekith makes an attack on Lizard, Lizard cannot use his toughness. However, he can use the invulnerable because he's not getting the invulnerable from his defense slot. He's getting it from the gauntlet, and therefore he can still use it. So any power from an outside source like Impervious from the Book of Skulls, or in this case the Infinity Gauntlet, the character will still get to use. So in summation, he keeps opponents from being able to use defensive powers, but only once they've hit. So Shape Change, Super Senses, Energy Shield Deflection, and Combat Reflexes are still good against him. We also showed that he doesn't let you use any power in your defensive power slot, even if that special power gives you something like, say, Prop Control, which isn't typically a standard defensive power, but because it's in that defensive slot, he lets you no longer use it until your next turn. So those are kind of the two things that I want to draw on, is he has to actually hit before he removes your defense powers. And you can, if you're also, he only takes away what is in your defensive slot. So if you have powers from an outside source, from a source that's not your defensive slot, you still get to use those. However, he takes away anything that is in your defensive slot, regardless if it is typically a standard defense power. You can copy and paste this link if you want more detailed explanations on his wordings and everything. I feel like this video is pretty detailed, but I wanted to link the threads just in case you wanted extensive details. And I also wanted to note this same principles that apply to his power, his trait, also apply to Invincible Iron Man, Iron Paladin's attack power, but only kicks in whenever he does a close combat attack, but it's worded the same. After he hits, the opposing characters can't use defensive power. So you can apply these same things to Iron Paladin. If you guys have suggestions on a piece that you would like covered in this video series, just please comment below on the videos, and if we get a lot that are asking for the same figure, then I'll know that there's a definite need for that figure. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and catch our podcast weekly on iTunes and on dial H4HeroClix.podbean.com.